There are 5 players you'll regret not at least trying to trade away before week 7, because if you wait any longer, it might be too late. But if this is your first time here, I'm Joe. I've helped thousands of people just like you win their fantasy leagues over the last decade, and I plan to do the same for you in this video. But I start off every video with some urgent fantasy football news and answering some timely Q&A. Then we get into today's one key topic, so feel free to skip ahead, but let's get right into it. Good news out of Dallas today. CeeDee Lamb is finally back at practice after missing 3 weeks with that high ankle sprain. It's just a limited session to open up the week, but that's usually a pretty strong sign that he's trending towards suiting up this week. If things go smoothly, he's right back in the wide receiver 1 mix against Washington, and that would knock George Pickens down a peg in the rankings for sure. Terry McLaurin, his status is still uncertain at the moment. Looks like Washington fans may get that boost back as well with getting their number 1 wide receiver back in this same game. We just don't know how much he can actually do. He's still working through that quad injury, so fantasy managers should definitely have a backup plan ready. If he's active, it is a great spot against one of the softest secondaries in all of football. Jakobi Meyers. This is an interesting one too, because it looks like they're open to a Jakobi Meyers trade, but he is a little bit banged up with a knee and a toe injury. Did not participate in practice on Wednesday, but it looks like Vegas could be trying to make a move here. The teams like around the league believe that the Raiders are open to trading Jakobi Meyers, and even if they're not actively shopping him, he hasn't topped 60 yards since week 3, and he's been stuck in kind of this run-heavy offense. Unless he lands somewhere, he's basically a desperation flex at best right now if he does play, and if he does end up, I guess, getting through this injury relatively quickly. Puka Nacua, long shot to play this week. This is kind of what we figured. They could use probably another week to let him get healthy. Long shot to play against the Jags after tweaking his ankle last week. The good news is that injury isn't expected to be minor. If he does sit, looking like he's going to, Davante Adams jumps into an elite wide receiver 1 role right away. And the Rams could definitely lean on Kyren Williams a little bit on the ground as well, but amazing matchup for Davante Adams on the outside, and he's already capturing so many touchdowns and red zone targets in this offense in general that it's just an amazing spot if Puka does not suit up. This Panthers backfield is getting a little bit interesting. It looks like it might actually be a timeshare, regardless of what Rico Dowdle was able to do over the last 2 weeks. Now that Chuba Hubbard looks like he'll be back, it doesn't really matter at this point what he's done. According to the coaches, it looks like after those 2 monster games, it still wouldn't be a shock if both of these guys end up splitting carries, which is kind of a bummer, but it is something that we kind of expected. Looks like the Giants are looking to add a big name wide receiver, and they might be kind of hunting for one at the trade deadline. So we talked about Jakobi Meyers, but what about a guy like Jaylen Waddle, Chris Olave? Some people are saying that both of those guys are being floated and are available, but at 2 and 4 for the Giants, kind of a bold move. But yeah, I guess with Jackson Dart showing a little bit of promise, it's clear that they want to surround him with some more firepower, which is definitely a positive thing. Let's jump right into some Q&A. Got some really good questions on the last video, mostly looking at some rest of season stuff and some trade options. Tried to pick a few of these ones that will be applicable to everyone. So let's start with the first one. I'm going to need some help. Would you do Cook, Adams, and Tyler Warren for Kyren, Amon-Ra, and Darren Waller? I would. Actually, sorry, I would do the first side of that. James Cook, Devontae Adams, Tyler Warren, I have ranked significantly ahead, actually, of Kyren, Amon-Ra, and Darren Waller. I don't think Darren Waller is like a huge asset to be adding to a trade at this point. I'm not actively trying to give up Tyler Warren either. And yeah, I'm definitely more bullish on Devontae Adams than a lot of people. Amon-Ra on side B is definitely the best player in the entire deal. But Cook and Devontae Adams together, plus Tyler Warren, that's a haul. So I would prefer the first side of that one. Hopefully that helps. I have a chance to trade QJ and Pittman for JJ. Should I do it? I would, yeah. Quentin Johnson, Michael Pittman in order to get Justin Jefferson. I would absolutely do that 2-for-1 trade. Relatively, relatively fair, but I do like the Jefferson side. I traded Hurts, Pickens, and Etienne for Swift for that cake schedule. Ladd and Josh Allen. Did I win? For Swift. Got it. Yeah, I was looking at this one. I think I prefer the side that you got, yes, with Swift. I like that schedule quite a bit going forward. Ladd McConkey on the rise, and then getting that elite 1Z quarterback. You still have Josh Allen versus Jalen Hurts, which is pretty close to a wash. I think I would definitely prefer Josh Allen of that. So you're basically giving up George Pickens, who, again, we're going to talk about later in this video as a guy that I'm potentially willing to trade away. So I like that. Nice job. Was trading Justin Jefferson for Gibbs, Egbuka, and Rome a good deal? Jefferson for Gibbs, Egbuka, and Rome. So you get those 3 Yeah, absolutely, man. I'd be trading Justin Jefferson for Gibbs straight up probably. If you're getting Egbuka and Rome and Dunze in the same deal, yeah, elite deal for you. Nice job. Wish I had more owners like that in some of my leagues. Would you trade Diggs for Pacheco? My weakness is the running back spot. I prefer Diggs to Pacheco by a decent margin. Yeah. Henry or Mason Taylor? I prefer Hunter Henry. I don't even have Mason Taylor in my top 150. Obviously, he get a decent bump with Garrett Wilson banged up. But yeah, I still prefer Hunter Henry in that deal. Would you trade away Henry and Pickens for Saquon and Diggs? I would, yeah. I assume you're talking about Derrick Henry. So Derrick Henry, George Pickens for Saquon Barkley and Stephon Diggs. I would do that, though this is a really close deal. I think I would prefer the Saquon side of it, though, to be fair. Now's a good time to remind you guys, if I didn't get to your question, I do have a year-round, season-long community called the Fantasy Accelerator where I do answer every question. There's a link in the description for that, but I really enjoyed building this up throughout the offseason and also this year. Get you through draft season, in-season, off-season, everything you need to win your league and dominate your friends. But if you're not ready for the season-long membership just yet, top150free.com. You can get my top 150 rankings each and every week absolutely free. Put your email in there. There's a link in the description for this. And it's the exact rankings that I'm using to set my lineups every single week as well. All right, today's one key topic, 5 players who will ruin your fantasy team. Trade them away now. You can see George Pickens on the thumbnail. So we're going to start with George Pickens. Obviously, CeeDee Lamb getting healthier, but this just feels like a peak box score window if you do want to go and trade him. 5 straight games with a touchdown, back-to-back 100-yard games. Obviously, this huge game for 168 and a touchdown in week 6. Obviously, this is kind of like a sell high, really just stat inflation moment. In week 4, he led Dallas in targets, receptions, and production as well, just showing how the spike weeks can come at the top. But the Lamb variable here is really what's getting me. So this entire surge came while CeeDee Lamb with that ankle injury was out, and really just the continuation of that might be really difficult depending on CeeDee Lamb's health. So if you're of the camp that CeeDee is not coming back at full strength or that these ankle injuries can tend to linger throughout the season, then by all means, hold on to George Pickens. But I think you can get an absolute haul for him right now. And really just the environment boosted lines. This Dallas team in general has really struggled to stop anyone, which is a good thing for this entire offense. Their defense has allowed basically the most fantasy points to quarterbacks and offenses on the other side across the early weeks of the season, keeping kind of pass volume elevated. So even in that chaos, the usage swings kind of wildly with Pickens, which is a bit concerning to me because what happens when Lamb returns and maybe even if the pace cools down a little bit. So if Lamb's back and the shootouts kind of taper a little bit, Pickens reverts to more of like that downfield spike week profile, which we like, but I'm just saying I don't know if his value is ever going to be as high as it is right now. That's the whole point. It's not that I'm actively down on Pickens. I'm really not, actually. But I think if you're trying to make a move, Pickens is a guy that people are really valuing highly right now, potentially too highly. And that's for a guy that was pretty bullish on him going into the season. Speaking about another guy that we talked about a lot in the offseason that I've cooled on a little bit, Alvin Kamara. So age 30 season, it's showing a little bit. And actively, I guess for me, this is a guy that I talked about as a guy that was going to continue to get a ton of volume. And it didn't matter that he was in his age 30 season. That is what's changed, right? So I'll always say, if I can't change my mind with new information, then that's not a good thing for you guys, for me, for anyone. So Kamara's touches and his efficiency have plummeted. So 10 carries for 31 yards last week, 8 for 27 the week before. It's been basically a 50-50 split with Kendre Miller, which is extremely concerning, especially for a team that isn't going to score a ton of touchdowns in general. So when efficiency's down, the offense is already kind of down even worse. The Saints are 1-5. They're among the NFL's worst offenses by basically every metric out there. Kamara's averaged under 3.5 yards per carry in 4 of 6 games this season. So if there is an owner in your league where his name value is something that can kind of keep his trade value up a little bit, I would absolutely move on from him. I think the PPR floor is relatively safe, but I don't know if he's going to have league-winning ceiling at this stage of his career. So I'm trading Kamara now, but while his name still sells as like that safe running back too, if the volume starts to vanish even more before the fantasy playoffs hit, you're in a lot of trouble if you're holding the bag there. Speaking of holding the bag, T. Higgins, the bottom has fell out without Burrow, in my opinion, regardless of what Flacco's been able to do. I know he almost got in the end zone last week as well. The production that you're getting here, though, 62 yards is the season high. 4 games under 40 yards. This is basically a TD or bust type of wide receiver profile. Only 2 TDs on the entire season. He had a 42-yard bomb in week 2, and then he had a nice kind of catch around the goal line in week 5. So the spikes are kind of rare and inconsistent at this point. So my idea with these type of players is while the perception is still kind of ahead of reality, I think that this is someone that you can absolutely still move on from and still paint that picture that Flacco is going to basically elevate this floor, which might be true. I guess still don't think there's as much ceiling here as most people realize. So I think what you're protecting here is obviously Burrow still being out, and then you're really just protecting the name value depending on what you get from Flacco down the stretch. I think that there's still probably plenty of wide receivers in this range that I would rather have. Rico Dowdle. We're selling high on Rico Dowdle. I think that not enough people are taking seriously that this team is still very committed to splitting the carries here. So regardless of these two explosions that just happened, if you can find someone in your league that thinks that Rico Dowdle has stole the entire job, I would act on that pretty quickly. This is the exact sell window profile, these monster box scores, rare efficiency spikes. These rarely sustain anyways. And even having Hubbard coming back with that calf injury, it really just limits the volume overall. So I think there's kind of a little bit of a risk here. Obviously, if Hubbard comes back and he's not that effective, you're in a lot of trouble, I guess, if you moved on from Dowdle. But this is one of these ones where the perception can flip quickly. And I really want to take advantage of these huge weeks that he's just had if there's an owner in my league that would be actively trying to upgrade at running back and actively willing to kind of make a move there overall. Another guy that I'm selling high on, someone that we talked about, it's on the offseason, Cam Skattebo. I think there's probably a ton of people, if you've been watching my content, you might have him actually. So I think that this is one of those situations where if you drafted him at a really nice price tag and now he basically gets 3 touchdowns from inside the 5 in 1 week, it's a really nice time to cash in and try and grab some of that value that you captured by drafting him late in the draft. I think that anytime you get 3 touchdowns from a guy in an offense that's not going to score a lot of touchdowns, it's always like one of these sell high moments that I want to at least look at. So I think that this backfield is crowding a little bit with Tracy coming back. Singletary is still there. Rookie on a volatile offense. I think that really that's what it comes down to for me is the efficiency and the trust. The trust has been good. The efficiency has been just okay, and he's been scoring touchdowns. So it's not a fun or I hate to be that guy. I know everyone likes Cam Skattebo a lot, but if week 6 was the peak to cash out, I always want to try and cash out at the peak. We're trying to sell high when we can. So I'd be flipping Skattebo off this 3 touchdown headline for really just a steadier every week running back 2 before the touches and the TDs normalize back into a normal committee. So Skattebo, I think what you can get for him would surprise you. I think you could probably get a guy, if you wanted to move up at running back, you could probably get like a Bucky Irving, maybe even a Kyron Williams for Cam Skattebo. I would enjoy that. I think if you wanted to, let's just go through all these guys since we've gone through our 5 already. Cam Skattebo. I think if you wanted to move on from Dowdle, there's a few guys I think I would rather have rest of season. I would probably rather have Jaylen Warren. I would probably rather have Jordan Mason, Woody Marks, all of those guys. I would certainly rather have someone like Amarian Hampton, David Montgomery. I would have them a clear tier ahead of Rico Dowdle the rest of the way. T. Higgins. This is one like rest of season that if you're trying to get something for Higgins, you're probably going to want to live in this wide receiver tier. If you can get like a Quentin Johnson for T. Higgins, if you can get a Ladd McConkey for T. Higgins, that would be a home run. Someone like Deebo Samuel, Xavier Worthy, some of these like elite number 2s, I think would be a really nice target for T. Higgins. Alvin Kamara is an interesting one. I've talked about him a couple times as a sell the last few weeks, but I probably haven't given you guys enough direction on where I would go. Alvin Kamara, I would probably take on a guy like Jaylen Warren, like I said, Kamani Vidal, maybe even like a Ramondre Stevenson, Travion Henderson, that tier. Maybe a Rico Dowdle if you get someone like that for Kamara. I don't know if you can. You might even be able to get like a kind of like higher upside wide receiver like Matthew Golden, who we could see elevate as the season goes on. That would be my target there for Kamara. And then Pickens, I still think you can do pretty well on. I think you can probably move Pickens for like a Ted McMillan, a Jalen Waddle, a Brian Thomas Jr. I think I would rather have all of those guys down the stretch than George Pickens. If you can move George Pickens for like a Devontae Adams or a Javonte Williams, I would absolutely be doing that. So hopefully that's helpful. That's it for today. Drop as many questions as you want in the comments. I'll try and get to as many of them as I can before Sunday. Hit subscribe, and I'll see you guys on the live stream Sunday morning.